Okay, well, it's 6:32. I think we should get started and people are gonna just keep rolling in. My name's Jasmine Minbashian. I'm the Executive Director at Meadow Valley Citizens Council. Meadow Valley Citizens Council is a nonprofit organization in the Valley. We're actually one of the oldest nonprofits in the Valley, founded in 1976. By a bunch of dedicated citizens and volunteers to protect the natural environment and rural character of the Methow Valley. And with us today for this workshop, we've got Laura Super, our program director, and Drew Katz, who's our community engagement coordinator. And Drew's going to be moderating the discussion. And we're just really grateful to have you all joining us tonight. This comprehensive plan is a meaty topic. It's not a soundbite. And so we really appreciate you taking the time to come join us to really talk through what some of the issues are and how to really provide effective comments on what is a very, very important plan. And so what we have in store tonight is we want to make sure we save plenty of time to really go through any questions you might have and really dig in. But before that, I'm going to provide just a brief overview if this might be your first exposure to comprehensive planning and how it's been done in the Methow. I'm just going to give a brief overview and then I'm going to hand it over to Laura, and Laura's going to really dive into the comp plan itself, what's in it, what's in this latest draft, what's changed, and how you can prepare effective comments. I think most people are starting to become pretty familiar now with Zoom, but if you're new to Zoom and the whole webinar format, there is a chat function, which you're welcome to use if you have questions. There's also a Q&A feature that you can click on and type in a question, and then we can answer it. We'll either answer it by writing back, or if it's a question that probably everyone would benefit by hearing the answer, we'll just answer it in person. So that's how that will work. Drew, any other tips for using Zoom effectively that I missed?
No, I think you covered it just fine. Just again, if you have questions, put them in the question box. And if you have any tech issues or just want to communicate with the rest of the group, feel free to type your comments in the chat box. So thank you.
Great. All right, well, we'll just dive right in. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. This is not a formal presentation. It's not strange form of entertainment. We are trying to give you as much of information that we have at the current moment. So feel free to dive in if you have a burning question. Just type it in the chat or put it in the Q&A. Having trouble advancing the slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. As I mentioned, I'm going to do a little bit of background, and then I'm going to hand it over to Laura, and she's going to really dive into the comp plan and do the overview. And then towards the end, we'll do Q&A and also really how you can get involved and submit comments. So I'm just going to start really big picture, and what is a comprehensive plan? When you use the words comprehensive plan, most people's eyes glaze over, but it is a very important process for municipalities and counties. It basically is a blueprint for our future, and it can't be put more simply than that. It's a blueprint for zoning and future growth. Comprehensive plans will decide where new homes are going to be, where new businesses are going to be concentrated. It identifies lands as forest lands, mineral lands, or agricultural lands. And it also sets the framework for establishing a lot of other important land use policies. So most importantly, what a comprehensive plan is it's really our vision for our community and a vision for our future. It also takes a stab at estimating population growth, and really talks about the tools that we want to use to implement the vision, to keep our to form our community in the way that we want to see it formed, while protecting things like our environment and natural resources and our quality of life and also safety. So there's a few statutes that and laws that govern comprehensive planning. Probably most notably is the Growth Management Act, the GMA, and there's also another law called the Planning Enabling Act. We are affected by both laws here in Okanogan County, but not all counties are required to do full comprehensive planning under the Growth Management Act. So if you look at this map, it shows you which counties are actually required to fully plan under the Growth Management Act. And the reason that's significant is the Growth Management Act has a pretty stringent set of criteria and requirements that need to be met when doing comprehensive planning. So typically a county that is over population size of 50,000 and has shown a certain level of growth over the last 10 years is required to plan under the Growth Management Act. Here in Okanogan County, we're close to that 50,000 population mark, but not quite. So we are not required to plan fully under the GMA. However, we are required to do some certain parts of it, just not the full planning. The statute that applies to us here in Okanogan County is the Planning Enabling Act. And here, I just took an excerpt from the RCW, the Code of Washington, that just says these are the things that are required when you do planning under the Planning Enabling Act. You need maps, you need text that really describe what the objectives are, principles and standards. At the very minimum, you need a land use element, and you need to show how different uses of land are going to occur across the landscape. Some very basic stuff. You still need to provide estimates of population growth and how you're going to protect water, which is a really significant point here that will come up later, and I'm sure Laura's going to be chatting about. You also need to plan for transportation. What are going to be your major routes, utility lines, facilities, things like that, and also to have supporting maps, diagrams, and charts. We're also required to identify natural resource lands and critical areas, which is a requirement under the Growth Management Act. Natural resource lands are things like forestry, ag, fisheries, mining, and what steps are we taking to preserve those areas in that status. All cities and counties in Washington are also required to adopt critical areas, which include things like wetlands or areas that are really important for recharging aquifers, fish and wildlife habitat, areas that flood frequently, and also geological hazards. And while we do this planning, we're required to use the best available science to develop those policies and regulations. So comprehensive planning is not a new thing here. The first comprehensive plan was adopted in Okanogan County in 1964. Is that right, Laura? I think that's right. 1964, and then there was a major update in 1976, which was the year I think that brought us the Methow more completely planned area. And there's been a lot of stuff that's happened since then. And so this timeline that I have on the screen is just a snapshot of a much longer timeline. If you really want to geek out, maybe this Friday night, on the comp plan timeline, I've provided you here at the very bottom of the screen, the comp plan archive, a link to the archive of all the historic documents and steps along the way. But for now, I think the most important thing to really understand is that in 2014, Okanogan County adopted what we feel was a pretty flawed comprehensive plan that didn't adequately address many things, especially fire issues and water. And so MVCC, along with FutureWise, appealed that comp plan in Superior Court. And in 2016, Judge Christopher Culp basically said, you know, I can't really determine how to rule until I see the zone code. And then later that year, the zone code was adopted, and it was insufficient. And so we chose to appeal that as well. And so did the Yakima Nation. And we all agreed to consolidate the cases. In 2017, the judge issued a ruling which basically required the county to complete the comprehensive plan by December 31st, 2018. Well, that deadline came and went. And later that year, later in November, the county released a draft comp plan and scoping notice. And in 2019, a full comprehensive plan and draft EIS for public comment. During that time, Meadow Valley Citizens Council proposed an alternative to be considered as part of this process, which we called the citizens alternative, and sometimes it's referred to as the fourth alternative. And that was just to make sure that a lot of the issues that were being raised by the community were being addressed. And since then, there was change up in the planning department, and we got a new planning director in the winter of 2019-2020, last year. And our new planning director, Pete Palmer, really came in and I think did a very good job at taking stock of what had been done, taking a really close look at the court case, and just reevaluating whether the current comp plan was sufficient, and addressing some of the needs that were raised in the case, but also in the comments. And so she sent it out for legal review and review within her department. And we just got the updated version, a new version of the comp plan, and an updated, what's called an addendum to the environmental impact statement, or EIS is the acronym that's used frequently. And so those are the documents that are in front of us today. And there's a comment period now that's open through March 8th to provide comments. When we were advocating for the citizens alternative, it's worth noting that we circulated a petition to build support for the citizens alternative, and we had several, over 200 people signing in support of the petition, and a very, very encouraging turnout in the comments for that process. Those comments are still up on the planning department's website, and they're really, I would recommend going through and reading some of them. They're well done. So we were very heartened to see the incredible turnout from the public, from Meadow, especially from the Meadow and from MVCC members on this process. And I think it's made a very, very big difference in the quality and outcome of the plan that we have today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Laura to tell us what is in this new plan and walk us through that.
Thanks, Jasmine. I see that we've lost Zoom. I mean, we've lost Drew from Zoom, and he's following along in the chat. So he's still gonna help us moderate the chat. And my objective here is to try to not go too deeply, but give you a general overview of where we're at and provide some assistance in, to make comments that should be effective. This is not going to be an exhaustive list. We are going to come out with a comment guide shortly in case you really want to get into the weeds. But my goal here was to try to explain what's going on, what's changed, and comments that you could make that would be really helpful. And hopefully Jasmine can still control the slideshow. So the big thing to note is that there's actually 2 documents associated with this comment period. They were both released on February 4th to the public. One is the draft comprehensive plan that Jasmine was discussing, and the other one is the DEIS Addendum. And what that stands for is Draft Environmental Impact Statement. And the addendum part refers to the fact that the county did one draft environmental impact statement about 2 years ago. And because things have changed so much, they had to issue an addendum to describe everything that's changed since then. And so it's really important. Could you advance to the next slide, please? It's really important to comment on both, and I'll get into that in a little bit later. So the difference between the two is that the comprehensive plan provides guidance for every plan that follows, from zoning to the subdivision ordinance, to what they call the district use chart that allows, that tells people what they can do in what areas. If it's not in the comprehensive plan, it does not follow in other plans. All plans have to be compatible with the comprehensive plan. And essentially it contains a lot of goals and policies and deals with the big issues at a policy level by establishing goals and policies for different elements. As Jasmine was describing, an element can be something like natural resources, land use, and transportation. The draft environmental impact statement, the main thing that it does, besides describing what's changed and what process the county used to get there, is it lays out alternatives that affect the criteria for future development, for land use designations, and how we will direct growth in cities and towns, in unincorporated areas and rural areas. In many ways, the DEIS, the other thing about the DEIS is that only one alternative will be selected through this process. And so one reason that it's important to comment on both documents is that stating a preference for an alternative can be really influential. In a way, it is a little bit of a numbers game. If a lot of people express a preference for a particular alternative, even if that alternative isn't selected, it can influence the drafting of the final alternative to include the things that people care about. So that's important to remember. Things that have changed since the last plan are that, as Jasmine mentioned, we got a new planning director, and they met with MVCC. The county staff met with MVCC. They also met with the Yakima Nation staff last year. And the latest draft does attempt to address the issues of concern that were raised in our legal actions. And those include water quality and quantity, wildfire preparedness, designation of ag and forest lands. And that last one, I'm not going to get into that very much because every attempt I've made to describe it is just too dang confusing. So you might have to wait for the comment guide for that piece, or just trust that MVCC and FutureWise are watching that one and will submit comments to that effect. The thing that's changed about the DEIS addendum is that, unlike the DEIS that was issued 2 years ago, this one includes a fourth alternative as recommended by MVCC that we call the citizens alternative. It's a brief document. It's only 15 pages long. It analyzes the 4 alternatives. And I actually think analysis is a generous term. It describes the alternatives and compares them. And when an alternative is selected and it gets through the process, then the county will do an FEIS, a final environmental impact statement, that is required to be a more thorough analysis of the actual impacts of the selected alternatives. So here we go into talking about the documents. Next slide, please. I'm going to start with the draft environmental impact statement. It's short, it's important, and it's a lot simpler than the comp plan. So I think I can be fairly brief about this. And the basic facts are, it's important to comment on this, as I've mentioned. I'm way into repetition because this is complicated stuff. So if you hear something a few times, it's probably the most important thing. Hold your nose when you read it. It's not really well written. I noticed when I read the timeline of the process, it provides enough information to understand that this has been going on for a long time and that there are 4 alternatives to consider. However, there's information in there about public participation and about visioning and scoping that if you have been part of the long trail of trying to get a comprehensive plan update since the mid 2000s, like 2006, 7, 8, you'll see that that information is not really accurate. There's reference to a visioning process that was conducted as if it just happened a year ago, and it actually happened in 2007. So things like that do matter, but in a sense, we really want a good plan. And so we're holding our nose on some of this and just saying, okay, if this gets the job done, we're going to allow it. So we're going to focus on what's important, which is selecting a good alternative and really advocating for that. Next slide, please. So the first alternative is a no action alternative. And essentially what it does is keep the 2014 plan in place. Believe it or not, there's actually an effort to get the county to adopt this alternative. And there will be people at the public hearing who stand up and say, you don't need to change anything, just keep the same plan. So it's actually worth your time to spend a little bit of time in your comments pointing out why that's a really bad idea. Not just to mention that the county would probably get sued again, but the fact that for one thing, the alternative's driven by site-specific application of regulations, which means that instead of planning on a broad scale for the kinds of land use patterns that we want to see, it relies entirely on individual permit applications, which means that when somebody wants to do something, they go to the planning director, and whoever that happens to be gets to interpret the law. Which is partly why we're in the mess we're in with some of these confusing uses in some areas, because it's all been very much decided on a case-by-case basis in the absence of a good comprehensive plan. The other thing that the 2014 plan did was designate virtually everything rural, which led to major conflicts between neighborhoods and proposed uses like gravel pits, wedding venues, cannabis operations, and things like that. It failed to account for or predict the growth that is taking place now. It failed to account for or predict the major wildfires or the lessons that we learned from them. It also designated public lands instead of private lands for the required resource designations for ag and forests. So, I mean, if you say nothing else, it would be a bonus for you to say, please don't select alternative 1. Next slide, please. Alternative 2 deserves very little attention. Nobody's talking about it. Both alternatives 2 and 3, when you read the draft environmental impact statement, they consider historically low population growth, which we now know is not how it's exactly working out. The Met How alone, by recent calculations, has grown by 31%. Excuse me, between 2005 and 2020. And those numbers, I believe, came before the pandemic rush that we've experienced. So we are not having historically low population growth. Next slide, please. Alternative 3 is actually not a bad alternative. It starts to turn things the right direction. It directs growth towards the towns. It limits growth in unincorporated towns so that it takes place. So like the town of Carlton, for example, would have growth limited until water and sewer were available to support urban levels of growth. It properly designates ag and timberlands. It allows some residential growth on large lots in lands that are designated as resource lands. It ties rural growth to physical and legal water availability, which is really important. It's one of the first times the county made an effort to acknowledge that that's a thing. And so there's good things in there. If the county chooses this alternative, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but we would need to work really hard to add more things that this community has said that it wants to see. Next slide, please. Alternative 4, MVCC's alternative is called out as such. It would be really helpful if you thank the county for including this alternative, and if you like it, you should vigorously support it. It takes the best of alternative 3 and adds a little more. It adds more definition and direction for permitting different uses in rural areas, which we specifically asked for that to be part of this alternative because it prevents conflict and provides more assurance that the neighborhood you moved into isn't going to start allowing incompatible activities like acid manufacturing, and allows developers of some activities more clarity about where those uses are approved or will be approved. There's more provisions for wildfire protection and preparedness built into this alternative, and there's provisions for overlays that would allow prevention of ridgetop development and dark sky protection, all of which have been listed as important for Methow Valley residents. Next slide, please. And now we'll talk about the comp plan for a second. Well, a few seconds. This is where it gets a little more complicated. So the basic components of a comp plan are a vision statement. There's a lot of population and growth estimates. There's countywide goals and objectives, and then a series of elements that lay out goals and policies for developing in certain areas. So this plan has elements like economic development, natural environment and resources, land use, recreation, and transportation. And it covers just about everything in those elements. In general, as far as the good goes, the plan is better and it makes some effort to address our concerns. It still needs some work, and public comment is really going to help direct the planning staff to perform the fixes that are needed. So here's just a few ideas. Obviously, like I said, our comment guide is going to be more comprehensive, but we're not looking for a lot of really detailed comments from folks. It's more important that you speak from a personal perspective about what you care about, be somewhat specific about how it fits into the plan. So what we like about the plan, right off the top, the vision statement is really nice. I recommend that you read it. It was started by the county commissioners. Several of us sat through planning commission meetings where the planning commission really worked on wordsmithing it and making it a lot more inclusive. So bravo to the county for writing a good vision statement that supports the diversity of this county. There's an indication of willingness in this plan to consult government to government with the tribes who have rights here in this county. So that would be the Colville Confederated Tribes and the Yakima Nation. There's an effort to address concerns about water and keep water rights in our watersheds. As you'll see in a minute, we still have some concerns about the way that they're addressing water, but I think it's worth recognizing that they're making an effort. The wildfire section is also improved, and the county has added an economic development element. Oddly, it's not found in the table of contents, so it took a little looking, but it's right up front in the document before the natural resources element. concerns that we have. Yeah, you can go to that next slide. First off, at this time, there are no maps. And I don't know about you, but I'm a pretty visual person. You can only read so much policy language before you really need to look at a picture, a color-coded picture, ideally, that tells you what this all means and what it's going to look like at a landscape scale. That is not available at this time. And we need to ask the county to provide those maps as soon as possible. So that's something you would maybe like to include in your comments. There's also no maps of transportation facilities. Words are good, pictures tell the real story. So we could get some improvement there. And I should reflect before I go on. You can go to the next slide. Again, these are high level comments. I probably sifted these out of a list of 25 or 30 comments and tried to combine them so that we wouldn't sit here all night and lose our audience. So so these are high level. They're what I think are the things that you folks might care about, and I look forward to hearing about other questions and thoughts you have when we get to the questions. So another concern is that the county appears with just one objective. In many ways, they're supportive of agriculture, but on page, I think it's page 15 or 16, they are planning for agriculture to be lost to development in the future because they have an objective in there that says, acknowledge that agricultural lands will be converted to other uses. And if you think about what you're trying to manifest in the future, maybe starting off by proposing that you're going to convert your ag lands to development is not the good way to go. So we would recommend rewriting that objective in order to protect and conserve agriculture. The county should work to conserve its agricultural industry. We can delete that objective, not sell out our farms, and replace it with an objective that supports protection. Next slide, please. The other concern we have that there's a few slides related to this. While they're making an effort to address water issues, words matter, and the way that it's written in, it's not entirely effective. And so these are our suggestions about what's wrong and how to maybe make the county's approach to water more effective. One problem is that the plan doesn't recognize current water realities. There's a plan to, and I think it's on page 15, to direct growth to areas where water is available, which fails to recognize that most, if not all, of the water in the county is already allocated, and that rivers and streams do not meet their in-stream flows in most years, and that wells are running dry. So one solution to that problem, well, let me back up again. There's another problem associated, is that land use designations outside of cities and towns continue to allow too many small lots, actually more lots than can possibly supported by the water supplies we know we have. And so a solution to that problem would be for the county to have an objective that more clearly recognizes that the current modeling we have available shows declining flows in the future due to climate change, and consider that in the planning. And another solution would be for the comprehensive plan to recognize the reality that there are not significant quantities of legally and physically available water in places to direct growth to. And rather than having that approach to go look for places where there's tons of water and bunch everybody up there, the county should start looking at conservation, mitigation, and water storage programs to accommodate future growth. Next slide, please. This is also in the water arena about not recognizing reality. I just covered it all with plans to study the wrong things. There's a number of references to studies about the impacts of lack of water availability on different areas to direct growth. I think that just serves to delay what we really need to do, which is to actually study and implement the things that will improve water supply for areas where too much growth is being planned. So that if the county focused on conservation, mitigation, water banks, aquifer water storage, and things like that, where the soils and geology would allow it and where environmental impacts are reasonable, that would be a more effective use of the county's resources to deal with growth and development, instead of, again, just trying to move it around and figure out how to get around the law, instead of finding out how to make water available through mitigation. Next slide, please. There's a lot more to unpack on the water issue, but I thought that was probably enough, and it might stimulate some interesting questions. So moving on to wildfire. The problem with what's in there, it's great. They've really improved the language, but it actually needs to go further and direct growth away from areas of high wildfire danger. And those are areas with single lane roads, areas that don't have two ways out. Things that we've all learned from several fire seasons and unfortunately some fatalities. We need to protect people and property and save the lives of our first responders by planning appropriately. And it doesn't mean that nobody can build there, but there needs to be more effort to direct growth away from these areas. Next slide, please. Wildlife, there's a couple slides on this. So they had some reasonable goals for wildlife, but they have a goal that says protect fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas. That's great. Unfortunately, none of the objectives then define what a fish and wildlife habitat area, conservation area is. So a solution to that that's relatively simple is to define those areas as including Department of Wildlife priority habitats and species and Washington DNR rare plants. That would about cover the gamut of species and habitats that need to be addressed and protected through effective land use planning. Next slide, please. So there's also a Growth Management Act required objective to protect those same habitats. And so Okanogan County needs to add an objective to designate and protect fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas. So they need to define them appropriately, and then they need to make it an objective to actually protect that habitat. And then those two things would effectively allow us to identify those areas on a map and make sure that they're protected, kind of like critical areas. Next slide, please. Getting down to the last two. Transportation, as Jasmine mentioned, that's an important one. It's just important to note that there's no identification of needed transportation facilities, how much they cost, and how the county will fund them. So it would be better if the plan included those things and included safety improvements, plans to improve roads to protect people and property from wildfires by creating second egress where that's possible and feasible and environmentally safe, and maintenance requirements. There's been a lot of talk about roads in recent years, and the comp plan is the place for the county to be proactive about that and really set a vision for a transportation system that serves the population that is anticipated here. And last but not least, and this is not at the back end of the document. In fact, it's not in the document at all, and it should probably be in the natural resources element. There needs to be some objectives listed to protect our view sheds. Because right now, as I mentioned, the comprehensive plan governing all the other plans, if it's not in the comp plan, it's not in any other plan. And so if we're serious about wanting ridgetop protection and preventing any more or significantly more ridgetop development in the Methow or anywhere else, if we want provisions for protecting our dark night skies, it needs to be in the comprehensive plan. And this isn't something that, unlike water and wildfire and things that are required by the Growth Management Act, where if we have to, it can go to court. None of this is required by law. And so this is the area where it's really critical that if you think these things are important, you need to include them in your comments. And again, if the county, for example, selects alternative 3, which does not have these provisions added, But if they see a lot of comments that say, we really want to make sure that our night skies are protected and that there's some goals and policies to support our ability to choose that, then they may choose to include those provisions. And if they do, it's important to remember the county doesn't have to do this at a county-wide scale. So it doesn't threaten areas of the county who don't care about ridgetop development or who don't care about dark skies. But what it would allow us to do in the valley would be to create overlays, planning overlays that would allow us to achieve those protections in places where everybody agrees that that's important. So those are the last little bits about what's in the comp plan and what I think might be useful from a really broad array of perspectives to comment on. And next, we'll just take a couple minutes to talk about how to be effective in your comments. And many of you are old pros at this, so almost don't need to say it. Next slide, please. So key takeaways are to make sure you comment on both documents. Try to be positive and constructive. I would start by talking about what I like about the document. That will encourage them to keep reading. Everything that we listed above that we like, things that you like about it. And then you can lead into things that you take issue with or that you have concerns about. And then I always try to be constructive in that, there's that problem and then here's a solution. I think that's a really effective way to think about commenting. Make sure you state your support for alternative 4 if you agree with us that that's the way to go. Make sure you submit your comments in on time. They're due on March 8th. Please consider in this new Zoom era how important a couple words of verbal testimony are. There's a planning commission meeting on March 8th, and assuming they can figure out how to get their online platform working, it would be really helpful to have a number of different voices speak up and say a few sentences about who they are, where they live, why this is important to them, and name a couple of things that they think are important. And if you're willing to consider doing that, we are more than happy to help out. So please feel free to, I think Drew's gonna circulate a survey after this webinar. And if you're willing to consider, or you know somebody who would be willing to consider testifying verbally for a couple minutes, please sign up. And also remember to tell your friends to comment on this. It's really important. I think I am now turning it over to Jasmine to talk about next steps.
Awesome. There's always this awkward lag when I try and find the cursor and the buttons. There are a few, before we go into next steps, that was a great kind of succinct summary of what we like and what we don't like so far from our initial reading. We are going to be publishing a written comment guide for reference. But in the meantime, I just wanted there are a few questions out there. So I wanted to open it up for anyone that may have questions. There was a question from Katie. She shared that it was her understanding that the comp plan is not a law, but a guidance document. What guarantee do we have that our county will follow it? Laura, you want to tackle that one?
Sure. I mean, it's a guidance document, but it's not a guidance document you can ignore because it is governed by various laws, and the documents that follow from it that actually really make a difference, for example, our zone code, our subdivision ordinances, those all have to be compliant, consistent with the comprehensive plan. And so there's numbers of places where the county does have to follow through. And the only real danger is if they misunderstand how to accomplish that, or they're in denial about something, which we've experienced. And the best remedy for that is public pressure. It's a lot faster than lawsuits.
Okay, so let me see if there's any other questions in the chat. Oh, yeah, here's another question from Phil. Is the updated critical areas ordinance included with these documents? That's a really good question.
I missed it. Sorry, I was looking at the chat.
Oh, is the updated critical areas ordinance included with these documents?
It
Really
is
good.
not. That's a really good question. And the only intel I have on that is from tuning into the last Planning Commission hearing. The county sent it out to the Department of Commerce in December for a 60-day review. And the new planning director told the Planning Commission she wanted to get through the comprehensive plan before addressing the critical area, like putting the critical areas ordinance through a public process. I believe it's the 2016 critical areas ordinance, and I don't think that it's changed at all. So if you want to get a head start and you can get that from the county or ask us to get it from the county, you're welcome to start digging in. We will in our comment guide have specific comments related to what's missing from the critical areas section of the comp plan. I just didn't want to go into it tonight.
Great. Okay, so next steps. So we are on this little timeline here. We are right there on the black comment workshop. Probably at the early next week, you can expect our comment guide in writing. The public hearing and comment period closes on March 8th. So you need to submit your comments by 5 p.m. On March 8th, no later. And then we really encourage you to also attend the public hearing, even if you've submitted written comments. It's really important for the Planning Commission to hear from people directly. There's no substitute for that. Verbal testimony can be really powerful. So even if it's just a minute, just a brief state of support for which alternative you prefer, and or addressing things that are important to you that haven't been addressed, that's important for the Planning Commission to hear that directly.
And I would add, even if you don't opt to do verbal testimony, since we're in this new world of online platforms, just seeing how many people took the time to tune in makes a big difference. So the only caveat to that is that the Planning Commission staff has had a horrible time this year getting their online platform to work. So stay tuned. We will definitely be trying to get out the most current information about what they're doing and how they're doing it, and try to come up with a SOS plan if they crash their website to make sure that people can attend the hearing.
Yeah, and bring a friend. We'd love to be able to get as many comments submitted during this comment period as we did during the draft DEIS in 2019, which was over 100. So if you could help us by asking a friend or two to join you in submitting comments, that would go a long way. And then from what we've heard from the planning department, we may actually see a final comp plan adopted this spring, April or May 2021. It goes from the Planning Commission to the Board of Commissioners, and the Board of Commissioners vote to approve it. And along the way, there could be some subtle changes, perhaps, from where it goes from the Planning Commission to the Board of Commissioners. So it's important to watch that process as well.
Katie has a question. Is there a provision in any of the alternatives for more local input, such as sub areas or more completely planned areas? And that's a good question. And I would urge you to read the comp plan as it stands right now, because there are provisions in there for sub-area planning, but people have different ideas. And, you know, the one piece of advice I got from a veteran land use planner was if you don't get alternative 4, then you should really consider trying to get the things that you want, like the dark skies and ridge lines, as part of the Met-How more completely planned area. But as many of you recognize, even that plan only extends a certain way down the valley. It doesn't include the entire watershed. And so that is an area that if you're tuned into that, it would be great to add that comment to your comp plan comments to make sure that the more completely planned area includes the entire Met-How and that includes subunits so that even the diversity within our valley can be recognized and the local preferences can be recognized in our local plans. I hope that answered your question.
There's another question in the chat from Barry. Do the commissioners have any power to amend what is presented to them? So it's kind of a more detailed question to what I just hinted at.
Right, and they do, and they may. It's a bit of a mystery. The thing is, if they amend it too much, well, so let me back up. When the commissioners get it, they can do a couple things. They can hold additional public hearings at their discretion. So there might be another round of public comment. They can amend it as they see fit. But if they amend it too much, then they can throw the county into another round of environmental review, more addendums or addendi, however you say that. So it can get more complicated and drag the process out. And I think there's political pressure not to do that. So it will be interesting. And that's another place where really strong public participation in the process to keep them from being confused about what people want will really help streamline everything.
Another question from Katie. Is a follow-up to her original question. Also, previously, the provision for sub-areas was based on how much land you owned, i.e. 1 acre, 1 vote versus 1 person, 1 vote. Has that been changed?
I was told at one point that was illegal and that it was changing, but that is only hearsay at this point. So that is worth following up on.
Great. Any other questions out there? Some really good ones. We're happy to stay here as long as you need to feel like you have a good handle on what you need for comment writing.
I'll put my email in the chat in case anybody has any questions and wants to email me later. If you wake up with a burning question, feel free, although I won't answer it in the middle of the night.
Great. So here's the information on where you can submit your comments. This information is also available on the MVCC website and also on the Okanogan Planning Department's website. I know the Okanogan County site is a little hard to navigate, but if you go to the main homepage, on the left-hand side, there's a little planning tab. And if you click that, it'll take you to the planning homepage, and that information, you have to scroll down a little bit, but it's right there, right on the planning department's homepage.
Question from Liz. Wait, where'd it go? Laura, you discussed high-risk wildfire areas. Have these been designated anywhere? They have, and that's a really good question because it makes the whole thing more complicated. When Okanogan County went through its community wildfire protection planning process the first time in 2007, and the plan has remained essentially unchanged, or the basic analysis of the county has remained unchanged since then. It was pretty well done. the entire county was designated as high risk. And really that's been borne out by our experience, because we've seen through the Carlton complex and this last fall, fire is high risk is not limited to forested areas. But I think when we're talking about high risk areas for land use planning, then it's a little easier to narrow that down to access, distance from fire stations, access, whether there's two-way access, whether the roads are suitable for holding fire equipment, and there's other features of the landscape that can lend themselves to more unpredictable fire behavior that are identified in the plan. Things like that would be ways that could be used to designate areas to be more cautious when directing growth. And there is a map of that in the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. I haven't looked at it in a while, and they defined several types of wildland urban interface. You, as a scientist, Liz, you will find it really interesting. There's a question from Barry about how important it is it to remind county residents that this plan can be applied to specific areas rather than countywide? I think that could be important. I mean, the plan itself governs the entire county, but there's provisions that can be put in there. Like when I talked about night skies, it's important to make sure people know that those provisions don't have to be applied countywide. There's a way to write the objective into the plan so that in places where people want to accomplish that objective, there's tools to do it.
Another question, is the comp plan the place to address affordable housing?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's yes. I think that it would be helpful, and I did anticipate this question, and then I didn't take the time to prepare for it, but as far as I know, it's not in there now. And it would be worth a double check to make sure, but that's another thing, we've been talking about it a lot because of what's been going on in the Valley for the last year. And I think it is really important to make sure that we're at least thinking about it when we're going into planning.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's why we kind of like to do these comment workshops prior to publishing the comment guides, because it's really helpful to hear also from members and other folks on what's on their mind. And it helps us write better comments as well. So thanks for bringing up these issues.
Right, and Gail just brought up as well, and that's a good point. One of the things that we've really advocated for is to use the plan to direct growth towards cities and towns. And that's really one of the best ways for affordable housing to work, is to be in proximity and access to the services that people need.
Another question about what other large thematic elements are missing, for example, waste treatment.
I would have to get back to you on that one. Our focus tends to be, or has tended to be, on these big issues. And I haven't had a chance to dive in at that level, but I agree it's important. So I'll flag that and check in with FutureWise about it too.
Great. Any other burning questions out there? All right, well, I just want to give one more plug to really helping us spread the word. It is hard to get people excited about comprehensive planning, but as you can see, it touches all aspects of our community and our life, and it's a really important guiding document that really sets the framework for so many other policies and ordinances in our county. So this is the time. And if you can help spread the word and recruit a friend or two or three to participate with you in submitting comments, that would be really great. If we can hit the benchmark of having over 100 comments submitted again, I think we'll make a good impression that people people care and people are watching this process. I think that's all we had tonight. Feel free to always get in touch with us if you have follow-up questions. And if you are not a member of Meadow Valley Citizens Council, I welcome you and invite you to join as a member. Our membership starts at $10 for Living Lightly and goes on up from there. And that's a great way to make sure you get the information that you need in a timely way. We'll email out the comment guide to our membership list and our mailing list, and that we can stay in touch with you as this issue progresses. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. Really great questions. Oh, and then, sorry, one more question. How important is it to remind county residents that this plan could be applied to specific areas rather than county-wide? I missed that one. Did you get that one? Yeah, okay.
We got that, but there is one more that says, do they have to address comments on the previous drafts? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, I think they've been working on it, but there's nothing wrong with reminding them that this has been pointed out before by over 200 people.
Yeah, we don't have to start from scratch. Oh, and then, yeah, we do have this, we have the Living Lightly membership, which is $10. So if you're on a fixed income or don't have a lot of extras cash to spare, we also can accept volunteers. So for 4 hours of volunteering, you get an MVCC membership as well. So there's a lot of different creative ways to be a member. Thank you so much, everyone, for showing up and being here and asking great questions. Again, feel free to follow up with us directly if there's something you thought of after the event that is still burning in your mind, and have a great evening.
Thank you.